investigate strange occurrences between his old friend, Dr. Henry Jekyll, and the evil Edward Hyde. And its impact is such that it has become part of the language. It's the very phrase, Jekyll and Hyde, like, you're like a Jekyll and Hyde person. Um, so that's where that comes from. Um, it's about a story that a man tells that months ago he saw a sinister-looking man named Edward Hyde trample a young girl after accidentally bundling into her. And Enfield is forced to pay Hyde £100 to avoid a scandal. Hyde brought them to this door and provided a check, later revealed to be Dr. named Edward. Brought him to a door, provided a check signed by Dr. Jekyll, a friend and client of Utterson. He's disturbed because Jekyll has recently changed his will to make Hyde a sole beneficiary, which is kind of strange there because it's the same, he's one and the same. And when Utterson tries to discuss Hyde with Jekyll, he refuses to even talk about it. But it's about an experiment and it changes him. And it's a science fiction in that way because of the idea of changing his personality, and like his alter ego, somebody he would want it to be. So again, it's that the madness, the mad scientist aspect of it. But it's again playing God with like in Frankenstein, you're making life, but you're also taking it away. So he was dabbling in stuff he shouldn't have. He wanted an alter ego apparently, and it was totally opposite of what he would normally be. So that's of course another great story to read if you have not read it, which I think most of us had. Of course, we've seen the movie with oh gosh, now I can't even think of his name. I hate when I do that. Spencer Tracy. That was, I think, one of the better ones of the Jekyll and Hyde movies. So please read or see the movie. And of course, we have, like I said, The Haunting of Hill House. Jane Eyre is actually considered gothic fiction by Charlotte Bronte. Rebecca by Daphne du Maurier. That was an excellent book. Again, it's a classic. With Orson Welles and Olivia de Havilland in the movie, it was that was so good. With the, of course, Castle and the Secret that he was keeping. Again, another excellent gothic fiction. And now we're going to get more towards Anne Rice. One of her very first ones, Interview with a Vampire. It was published in 1976, and it's the first one of the Vampire Chronicles. Excellent book. And I know a lot of people read Anne Rice. Please, if you like the vampire genre, type of characters and witches and ghosts, even her Vampire Chronicles series is totally excellent. And of course, we discussed The Witching Hour some. Interview with a Vampire was one of the first ones I read of hers. And it's just such an excellent book. If you've seen the movie, it pretty much sticks with it. Um, it's about these are of course turn of the century event. We have Brad Pitt, of course, um, and Tom Cruise, and um, it centers on the vampire Louis um, Lestat, who is Tom Cruise, and of course when they Louis is telling his life about his life to a reporter, how it all started. Um, and Rice composed the novel shortly after the death of her young daughter Michelle, and she served as inspiration for the child vampire Claudia in the series. Um, it was followed by a large number of sequels, of course, um, and it has been adapted as a comic 3 times already. So, but Louis is telling his story to a reporter, and how he didn't have a choice, and how he was turned by Lestat, who he just wanted this company, and so he turned him into a vampire, and they became immortal companions. And this is during when plantations were around, and um, that kind of setting. And Lestat, spends his time feeding off the plantation slaves, and but Louis finds it morally repugnant to murder humans to survive. So he just feeds from animals and whatnot that's available. Um, but the slaves began to fear them, and they instigate an uprising. And Louis sets his own plantation in fire. And he and Lestat exterminate the slaves to keep word from spreading about the vampires in Louisiana. And I love her settings in Louisiana, New Orleans. It's filled with such culture. Of course, you have the voodoo background there, um, the priestesses and whatnot down there, and so it's a culture steeped in folklore, and not so much folklore, I think. Um, you have the white magic, black magic, so the setting itself is just so appropriate for these books. Um, and once they escape New Orleans, um, Louis feeds off a plague-ridden 5-year-old girl. She's going to die, so he's beginning to think of leaving Lestat, and fearing this, Lestat turns the girl into a vampire daughter for them. She is given the name Claudia, and Louis is just horrified this has happened. But they begin to care for her, and she takes to killing and feeding easily. But she begins to realize that she's never going to grow up. She's going to her mind is growing, but her body will always be that of a young girl. And she blames Lestat, of course. After 60 years of living with him, she hatches a plot to kill Lestat by poisoning him and cutting his throat. And Louis is involved in this, and they dump his body into a nearby swamp. And as Louis and Claudia prepare to flee Europe, Lestat appears. He survived in the swamp. He fed off the wildlife there, alligators and snakes and whatnot in there. It was pretty, what's the word I want to visual. That, and but he appears and attacks them. But Louis sets fire to their home and barely escapes with Claudia, leaving Lestat to be consumed by the flames. And after they go to Europe, and they seek more of their kind there. They travel throughout Europe and encounter vampires. But the vampires they encounter seem to be nothing more than mindless corpses. They're not like they are. And when they reach Paris, they encounter vampires like themselves. And specifically, you get to meet Armand, the 400-year-old vampire, and his coven at Théâtre des Vampires. And it's an ancient theater, and his coven disguise themselves as humans, as a theater troupe, and they feed on the live terrified humans in the from the audience, and and they think the killings are just part of the performance. So, and Claudia is just up in arms about this, and she considers cheap theatrics. But Louis and Armand are like drawn to each other. Um, Convinced that Louis will leave her for Armand, Claudia convinces Louis to turn a Parisian doll maker, Madeline, into a vampire to serve as a companion for her. And Madeline and Claudia live together, but all three, Louis, Madeline, and Claudia, are abducted one night by the theater vampires and Armand. And lo and behold, here comes Lestat. He survived, of course, and his accusation against Louis and Claudia results in Louis being locked in a coffin to starve, and Claudia and Madeline are locked into a chamber in an open courtyard. So when the sun rises, it shines directly on them, and of course they turn to ash. Um, Armand releases Louis from the coffin, um, and he finds the ashen remains of Claudia and Madeline, and he returns to the theater and burns it to the ground, killing all the vampires inside but Armand. And him and Armand travel across Europe, but he never recovers totally from Claudia's death. And the connection they have between Louis and Armand, it of course dissolves. And finally, he returns back to New Orleans in the early 20th century, and he lives as a loner. But he kind of lives in the shadows, and he never creates another companion for himself. Louis ends his tale, and he is aware of his immortality and all the pain and suffering that he's had to witness over these years. But the reporter, he only sees the great powers granted to a vampire and begs to be made into one. And Louis gets very angry because he's learned nothing. He's learned nothing from what he's told him. Louis refuses to turn him. He attacks him and vanishes. And then he leaves to track down Lestat and hopes he can give him mortality. And so that is the first in the Vampire Chronicles, Interview with the Vampire. The book is excellent. I have all of Anne Rice's books, The Witching Hour, The Vampire Crown, Memnoch the Devil, The Queen of the Damned, The Vampire Armand, Blood and Gold, Blood Canticle. These are all Blackwood Farm, excellent book. Merrick, The Witching Hour, Vittoria, who is another vampire they meet. Lasher, which is of course from The Witching Hour. Taltos, The Mummy, Servant of the Bones. It's all excellent books. She is a brilliant author. Her characters come to life. You will absolutely love her. But because of the ambient setting in, basically old New Orleans, I mean, like I said, it is steeped with the voodoo and witchcraft and ghosts and just everything combined. So it just makes the setting so much better, and it really gives credence to the story she tells. She is best known for her popular in the Vampire Chronicles. So some of the movies that were made, of course, Interview with the Vampire, Queen of the Damned. I thought it pretty much stuck to the book. Characters were pretty much on it. I thought they did a really good job with it. I love Peter Townsend. I thought he did an excellent job. So she's 75 years old, and of course lives in New Orleans. So there you go. That's why the setting is there. Excellent though. um, some of her own